Okay. So thank you very much, Tristan, for coming here. It's a great honor to have you on this talk because since 2014 you have been the founder of Mozilla Europe, which to me is one of the top achievements when it comes to people that I want to interview on my channel, and you are among the first. And
Dude,
I'll just
thanks.
I'll just keep your yeah, I'll just skip your resume, and I won't go over all of it. It's just that you founded Mozilla Europe in 2004, and in 2018 you joined Qwant, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
And
right.
I was told by some of your colleagues that I have spoken to before that you are now the chief executive officer of Qwant. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so I would like to know a bit more about your journey, and especially why did you find found Mozilla Europe, and what led you to founding Mozilla Europe, and then why did you decide to join Quant? So that's like two questions in one, but you can start with the first, which is why Mozilla Europe.
Well, it's a long story, and it goes back when I was 14 years old. It was in 1980. A friend of my parents just bought a personal computer. It was a Tandy Radio Shack TRS 80, and it was really one of the first computers to make it to France. And he thought that maybe while he was going away on vacation, I could use such a computer and I could be interested by such a machine. And so he lended it to us. And I spent the 15 days of the Easter holidays learning how to program in that in the basic language, which is a terrible language, by the way, but still easy to learn. And I learned it by myself with the manual. And I was very excited right from the start that what we could do with a personal computer. And then a few years later, I discovered networks. And then I realized a few years later that only networks would connect machines, but they would connect people. And I was like, every time it was a revolution. Discovered a personal computer, and then the networks, and then the fact that people started using networks, and that the goal really is to connect people. And I've been an enthusiast, a computer enthusiast, right from my 14 years old in 1980 to today. Um, and I was happy, and I discovered the web, and the web was fantastic compared to what I used before, which was email um, on Unix systems. And so it was exciting to see people adopt the technology, and then came online services. It was a new excitement, new revolution, and then the smartphone came, and that was amazing to have a computer connected to the internet in your pocket. All of that was super exciting, except that I realized that technology was not neutral. Just because it's new and more powerful doesn't mean it's going to be used in a proper way. Basically, the technology put in the hands of a few people was extremely powerful to gain control and power over the users.
Mm-hmm.
And so this got me into free software or open source software, whatever you want to call it. They're pretty similar, although not exactly the same. And I got hired by Netscape. Maybe for the oldest people in the room, Netscape is the probably one of the first internet companies. That was back in '97, and it was exciting. And but Netscape was fighting a large company named Microsoft. And Netscape was the company that made the web browser popular with their Netscape Navigator, and then later Netscape Communicator. Uh, and they were competing with Microsoft, and Microsoft was concerned by the internet and the web, and decided, well, they realized that the web was going to kill their business model, because basically their business model was to sell Windows to OEMs, to manufacturers of computers, and the other business model was to sell Office licenses, Microsoft Word, Excel, and such, in on CDs, on diskettes, and then later on CDs into shrink wrap boxes in actual stores, and they were making a lot of money with that. And then when the internet came and the web came, and people started using browsers, they realized that soon every computer, whether it was Windows or not, provided that it had a browser running, would be, it was a breach into Microsoft monopoly on Windows, and potentially people would be able to create applications running on the web, applications that would compete with the other side of business of Microsoft business, which
Mm.
is Office. And soon, well, it took years, literally, but soon you would have a webmail, and you would have what became Google Docs, and
Mm-hmm.
Google Spreadsheet and stuff like that. Basically, web applications that would replace the Office software. And,
Yeah.
and in the meantime, of course, Microsoft created Office 365 and stuff like that. But back in '97, they decided to kill Netscape by making their own browser, and shipping it with Windows in order to basically to kill Netscape. And they were really close to succeed, and Netscape decided to create the Mozilla Project,
Mm-hmm.
which was basically saying, we have our web browser, the source code is proprietary, therefore the source code is a secret. And what we're going to do, because we're a small company competing with Microsoft, and we won't be able to survive if we stay, on the same course. We need to think outside of the box, and instead of trying to make proprietary software, we will open source the code of our product, and this became the Mozilla Project.
Wow, that's a
Uh,
fascinating story.
and so Microsoft, who was good at killing one company, which was the leading company when it came to browsers, suddenly had to fight with volunteers and the Netscape employees building open source code. That was the first time a company open sourced the software products ever, I think. Or maybe there were tiny exceptions, but really something big with a very popular product, which was Netscape Navigator, which was the leading browser at the time. They open the source code and they say, come on, everyone, come and join us, come and help us improve and build the next generation browser. And once we have it, everybody can have it for free. And you can collaborate using the web in order to do that. And that was the first time, open source software had been existing for a while, like maybe 15 years, but it was built in labs like the MIT or stuff like that, where people were working together, exchanging. This is going to make you smile. Exchanging tapes, magnetic tapes with software on it. But that was in the '80s, and now we're at the end of the '90s, and well, there was the internet, and people could exchange software and collaborate using the internet. That was the first time it was created. Like today, everybody uses GitHub. Not everybody, but every developer uses GitHub or Git variants. But Netscape created what is a product which is called Bugzilla, and Bugzilla is still used today by the Mozilla Project, in order for people to collaborate and build a new browser. And to be honest, it didn't work really well at first. And so I was a Netscape employee at the time, based in Paris, working for Netscape Europe. And they decided, Netscape decided to build that Mozilla project, which was open source, opening the source code of the browser. And I was really excited by that because I knew about free software from a previous life. I had met with Richard M. Stallman which is the guy who created the Free Software Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew I was using his product, which is an Emacs code editor, and so I knew about all of that. But for many people at Netscape, free software was just something weird. They understand the fact that the browser was going to be free, that for the price thing they got it, but nobody really, well, engineers do understand what a source code is, but salespeople and people in marketing and the customers and the journalists did not realize what the source code is, and nobody had any idea what open source and free software was. And so, well, I was the guy in Europe that understood that. And by my position, I was working with PR, the public relations. I was the guy who had the privilege to explain to thousands of people what this was all about. And after some time, to be honest, the Mozilla project uh, uh, didn't do very well at the beginning. It took some time to take off,
Mm-hmm.
and the Netscape management was and Netscape was bought by AOL at the same time. And the AOL people were more interested, in page views, all the basically they had a proprietary service before doing the web, and they didn't really understand what open source was and how they were going to make money out of that. Um, and so after a while, they decided to let it go. We are not interested in that Mozilla thing anymore. That was the summer of 2003. And so they decided to give it up. And every Netscape employee working on the Mozilla project, not all of them, but really most of them, were let go. They were told, to go find a job somewhere else. And that happened to me, like everyone. Uh, and so, well, I was I was very concerned because the Mozilla project for me was extremely important. I thought it was very important to have competition in the browser space
Mm-hmm.
because Internet Explorer was competing with Netscape. But after they had won the battle of the market share, once they were getting close to being a monopoly, Microsoft with Internet Explorer, we could see that they stopped investing in development of Internet Explorer. And I could see that the web, because of the lack of innovation in the browser space, I could see the web could die slowly, but it could die.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the web is beautiful. I think it's a fantastic invention. It is really special. Why is that? Because it relies on open standards. Like everybody can start building web stuff, whether it's a website, a web application, or stuff like that, without having to ask for permission. What you need is a machine, a text editor, which is, often comes for free with the machine, an internet connection, which is relatively cheap, and your brain and some time. And there you go. You can create web stuff. And if you want, you can, buy hosting, you can buy your domain name and stuff like that. But really, you can get started very easily, and you can contribute to the web very easily, and that's really cool. And as opposed to newer platforms like iOS and Android, where you have to go through an app store to distribute your work. And also building an app is significantly harder than building a web page, and needs more resources. So this is the why I thought the web was fantastic and was actually threatened by the lack of competition in the browser space. And so I didn't want the Mozilla project, even though Netscape and AOL didn't want the Mozilla project. We're not so interested in the project anymore. And so in the US, My colleagues working at Netscape started the Mozilla Foundation. And here in Europe, with a couple of colleagues and friends, uh, we knew that the European market and then was something complicated to understand when you are in the US because you have different languages, very different cultures. You know, the Germans, the French, the Spanish, the Italian, the Swedish, the Greek. You know, they are all very different people with different habits and values and such. And I knew that for someone in California who was very busy trying to develop the code of Mozilla, uh, getting to Europe to work together to build the European versions and such and launch in Europe was going to be complicated. On the other hand, I personally knew how to do this because I've been doing it for Netscape for a while, and I was known for that within the Mozilla project. And on top of that, at the same time, we had, and it was still not very public, but a couple of engineers within Mozilla had started building a piece of software that was going to be very innovative. Um, and that piece of software became Firefox. So I knew that we would have to launch Firefox in the future, in a near future. It was it was in the pipe. It was being developed, and maybe uh, when it would be finalized, Firefox could actually be a success on the market and would be able to bring back the competition in the web browser space. And so we had to make it work. And so I started a non-profit organization here in Paris from my place. I don't, it's a big city. We don't have garages here, but I do have a living room. And so in my living room, I created Mozilla Europe with members of the Mozilla community here in Europe. Nobody wanted to be the president of that thing because it implies responsibilities, and if things go south, well, I could have trouble. The president could have trouble, and so well, I I accepted to become the president, and I came I was president and founder of Mozilla Europe. I stayed there for a few years until we started to develop Firefox so much that it was better to have a subsidiary of the foundation take over the work that was being done in Europe. And then this is why I created Mozilla Europe and helped it until 5 years ago.
Wow, that was a really long
That was a
answer.
long response. I'm sorry for
Yeah.
that, but it's a long story.
No. That's fine. That's fine. It was very fascinating.
It's a bit too long, maybe, right? I'm sorry.
No. That's perfect.
No, it's good.
Some of what you said about your personal story is very similar to what you hear about, other people, hackers or anyone else who started with computers. And I read it about, Snowden in his book, that, he was fascinated with computers from the get go. And he really wanted to learn what you can do with the computers and that you're really free and you don't have to ask anyone for permission. And then how would you say it is now? Do you think that your mission is successful, or do you think that the web is becoming less open? Because you said you don't have to ask for permission from anyone, but right now, much of the web infrastructure is captured by a few of the tech companies, including Amazon. You have to go to Google to ask for permission to advertise on the search, and if they want to pull you from their search results, you basically don't exist. Same with Facebook and same with YouTube. So how would you say the balance is today?
Yeah, the really in my life, there was the excitement of the beginning, and succession of excitement from PC to the internet to the web, to the fact that it connects people and the smartphones. and all of that. And suddenly, well, not suddenly, it's just the opposite. Slowly, maybe it came to my head really quickly, but I was like, this thing is starting to be broken, right? It's it started with privacy, mostly for me. Like at some point, I thought that having all your data into the hands of a few people was disturbing, and people kept telling me, yeah, but it's not really other people, it's computers,
Yeah.
it's the cloud. And then it came to me, and I think I saw this on the sticker from the Free Software Foundation Europe, which I loved. It said, "There is no cloud; it's just someone else's computer," and that was
That's so
so
true.
true.
Yeah.
It's just, why you have wonderful machines with you, whether it's a PC, whether it's a smartphone, and why would you store your own data on someone else's computer? And not only data, but also run web application from other people's computer.
Yeah.
And the guy says, yeah, but in order to run that app, I need your data. And 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 I say, yeah, I mean, cloud computing and web apps, it's cool and all that, but really, we're going, things are not going in the right direction. I think there is something broken here, and it was disturbing to me. And I've been a hacker myself in the past, whether in programming, but also trying to breach to other people's computer for fun. And I was concerned about having all of this data, especially with the smartphones, which are really full of sensors. It's cool that there's a GPS sensor in it because it's super helpful. But at the same time, there were a few scandals that opened my eyes. Uh, I remember very early in a Facebook's history where there was a scandal on the iPhone, early days of the iPhone, where we learned that Facebook started, well, had access to your address book. I think that was in 2009 or 8. Facebook had access to your address book, which was okay for it could make sense for the features they had to offer as a social network. But they, as soon as they had access to your address book, they would upload the whole content of it to their systems, to their servers,
Hmm.
without actually telling you why. But why? It was like
Yeah.
super disturbing that yes, they need to access that. But access is something, uploading it to their servers and keeping it after you've closed your account. That was so wrong. And they were, being into these things and reading a lot on the internet about all of these things. That was like super annoying that people didn't realize because they don't have the education to understand the issues, the technology that creates the issues, and such. And of course, I started, being interested in concern about all of this, and then came Snowden and the revelations. And you know what? It was very disturbing. That was June 2013, and that was very disturbing on one hand, and at the same time, it was really good because the week before Snowden, the people like us that were concerned were called paranoid, and the week after the Snowden revelations, we're just well-informed people. So it was quite a relief for us with my hacker friends and people, were trying to explain the technology to ordinary people that yes, there is a danger in putting all your data and centralizing everything into the hands of a few companies. Some of them are good people and try to do their best, and some of them are not so good people. And on top of that, you have, security agencies like the NSA that enjoy and leverage the fact that we centralize all our data, even something super private, into the handful of companies because they can get it there, right? And if you had to sum up the Snowden revelations really in a few words, I would say, I mean, there are like literally thousands of documents, right, in the Snowden revelation, in the Snowden files. But really, if you have to sum it up into one sentence, is that mass surveillance is made possible because we tend to centralize all of our data. If not, if each of us stayed, in a decentralized internet and kept our personal data on our devices, then spying on people would be a lot harder. Really, it's centralized data centralization is what makes mass surveillance economically possible. It's a matter of money, right?
Yeah,
The
that's
NSA
true.
wants to know everything about everyone. It's super expensive, but we're dumb enough to put all of the data in the same place, so they just have to go and get it. That's for me. If I had to sum the Snowden revelation, that would be that sentence.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. That centralization is what makes mass surveillance economically feasible, and maybe it is why we have such huge centralization because it might be encouraged by these security agencies. Um, because from
And
my
the business model of targeted advertising.
mhm.
In order, really the business models of these big platforms today, and I try not to give names, but we know who they are, um, is targeted advertising. When I do conferences, with people, and I tend to ask them that question: who is a customer of, say, Facebook in the room or
um,
Google?
yeah,
And people, a lot of people raise their hand because they feel like they're customers
yeah,
of these companies.
it's
And
advertisers.
and right, exactly. And I say, and then I say, okay, so I count the hands, and I ask them, when is the last time you have sent a check to these people? And some people do, right? It's okay if you advertise on if you advertise on Google and Facebook, you have to send checks or bank wires and stuff like that. You have to send money to these. But other than that, you don't. You don't. And then I show a picture of two cows in a field, and I ask the people. These are milk cows that produce milk, and I ask the people, do you think these cows are clients of the farmer? Well, once I had a guy who said, yes, sure they are. But I think that's it happened only once. Of course, not. Maybe he was dumb or he was playing with me. I don't know. But of course, no. The the cows are not customers of the farmer.
Yeah,
On the other hand, there is someone who buys the milk from the farmer, and this is where the commercial relationship, the business, does happen. Basically, we are the cattle, the cows of the farmer. We read pages, we see advertising, we consume advertising, we click on advertising, we produce content, whether we like if we watch a video until the end, if we leave a comment, if we upload a video ourselves of kittens or babies or anything. Uh, so we produce stuff for these platforms, but the real money is between the platform and the advertisers. And this is an issue because people do not understand that really. They see companies, they tend to see themselves as customers, consumers, and so they must be clients of these companies. No, they are not. They are the cattle of these companies. And this needs to be explained because too often it's not explained, and people think it's okay. And on top of that, it's okay. Many people do not receive education about IT and digital and stuff like that. First, no formal education. The education they receive is error messages, or wizards when they run an application for the first time, or when they go and buy a smartphone, the guy in the shop tells them which app does what. But that's pretty much it, right? So I don't blame people for not understanding that. And on top of that, they don't realize that they give away a lot of their data to these platforms because data is not visible, right?
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't exist because you can't see it. And data also is transferred, sent to the servers of these big internet platforms, and it's sent wirelessly or on a wire, but most of the time wirelessly. And you don't see the radio waves, right? You don't see the 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi waves. No. So it's like it doesn't exist anymore, right? They
Yeah.
don't realize that when they go and walk in the street, their GPS can be activated and produces data that can be sent to, I don't know, map applications and social networks and advertisers and such. They don't realize that because they don't know that. They can't see it and nobody tells them. And that's bad. That's bad because, yeah, that's terrible.
Okay, so what do you think is the solution to all of this? Would you say that you are hopeful that this will change?
Well, yes, yes. I'm to be honest, I'm working on it. Uh, it takes pretty much all of my time. Um, I don't think. Well, there are basically two things that I don't like, and and one may not resonate well with you or with the audience, um, and the other will.
Okay.
First, so I'm one argument may sound weak to you, and that's okay. The first thing is I don't think we should accept surveillance capitalism. Surveillance capitalism, the business model that I describe is called surveillance capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
These big companies that harvest a lot of personal data and monetize it with advertisers. This is what we call surveillance capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, and I hope we can. I don't. I'm sure we could in an ideal world. We could decide that this business model based on data being captured for targeted advertising, this is not a right. This is not a proper business model. It's good. It's not good. It's toxic. It's toxic for democracy. Without targeted advertising and all of this, we wouldn't have Cambridge Analytica. We wouldn't have the Russian trolls on Facebook try to hack elections and stuff like that. We wouldn't have the Brexit campaign being hacked. So I think we should not agree that surveillance capitalism is okay. We should find something else instead. I'm working on it. And I'll explain how a bit later if you want. The second thing that bothers me is I'm a French citizen. I love my country. I love Europe. Um, I think this is a great place. Europe is a great place. The US is a great place too. I've spent a lot of time there. I love Canada too. I love in many other places. But really, at heart, I'm a European citizen. And I know that how to say that? We in Europe have values, things in which we believe that is slightly different from the American values, which I like, but they are not my values. It's different. It's a different place. Like for example, in France we have something called the CNIL, and the CNIL is the French Data Protection Authority. And as far as I can tell, it's the first data protection authority that was created on Earth in 1978. That's, a long time before the web.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like roughly 15 years before the web. Um, and it's important. And at the time in France, we realized that having a huge file of all the people, all the citizens, could lead us to trouble from a democracy standpoint, from the freedom standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
If you know everything about someone, you can control the person.
I
and
agree.
and and there is that really good TED talk from Glenn Greenwald, and Glenn Greenwald is one of the journalists who got the Snowden revelations firsthand. He was in that hotel room with Snowden and got the data directly from him. And Glenn Greenwald had that a TED talk about that, and basically what he says is that when you are under surveillance, you tend to change your behavior. You tend to self-censor. You don't allow yourself to do stuff that could be perceived as weird. And that's tricky because, for example, if you have an idea which is political in nature, and maybe you think that this or that, maybe you think that social security should be the norm, or you think that, I don't know, whatever it is. If this idea is a little, you know, not too common, maybe it's a good idea. Uh, Except that if you are under surveillance, you will not dare saying it aloud because you can be heard. And your idea, when you have it initially, your idea is not perfect. It's not polished. It's a bit rough on the edges. And maybe you need to chat about it with friends and discuss it. Is it good? Is it bad? Which part of my idea should I change? How could it evolve? Uh, but if your idea is really good and means, and it could mean social change, then the powerful people don't want anyone to hear about that idea because it will threaten the status quo, right? And so they have interest in not you having this idea or spreading that idea.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a dumb idea and nobody cares, right? Whatever. But not all my ideas are good. But if I am under surveillance, I cannot express my true self. I don't have the full freedom of thinking and sharing. So this is what Glenn Greenwald explains about surveillance, and I think it's very important. There is also a very cool. It's cool, but it's very boring because it's a scientific paper, which is called scientific chilling effects. Sorry, chilling effects. I think it's published in the Berkeley Law Journal. I'll double check and send you the link.
Okay.
Um, it's um, it's very interesting. It shows that on Wikipedia in the US, people tend to visit pages more and more when they're related to terrorism, whether
Hmm.
it's the Gaza Strip or stuff like that. They want to understand, and they go to Wikipedia for background information because when you see terror attacks and stuff like that, you want to understand.
Yeah.
why these people do that, you know. And first, let me remind everyone here that yes, it's okay to go and visit Wikipedia. It's legal, right? And I think it's good. I think it's good that people, citizens, go and inform themselves, because what they see on TV or video clips on the internet, it's a lot of emotion. It's made, you know, to grab you, but really, does it bring a lot of information and start having you reflect on all of that? Not so much. They're playing with your attention and your emotion, but not so much on the information itself. So going to Wikipedia and learn about terror related stuff is cool. It's a good thing. And we could see over time that more and more people go and visit Wikipedia for these pages. And then the Snowden revelation were revealed, were published in the press. And citizens of the US have learned that there were agencies in the US that were listening to the US citizens. And you see, and it's written in this report, you can see extremely clearly that suddenly the number of visits of these web pages on the Wikipedia go down amazingly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
People knowing that they are under surveillance by the NSA do not dare go and visit Wikipedia for getting information about these topics.
Mm-hmm.
It's still legal, you know, even after the
Yeah.
Snowden revelations, to go on Wikipedia and learn about terror, what Muslims think, and what are the different versions of Islam and stuff like that. And they are not all terrorists and all of that. It's important to know all of that.
Yeah.
And but people do not dare doing it because they learned they were under surveillance, and maybe they were concerned that by visiting that web page uh, about the Gaza Strip or whatever would put them in jail. And
Yeah.
this is a clear demonstration that your behavior changes if you are under uh, surveillance. So this is one of my concern. That's the first concern. And the second concern is really being European. We have different values, and I think we need tools that reflect these values. And I told you about the CNIL, the French Data Protection Authority. It it happened in France, and it's not, you know, random that it appeared in France. It's because we have a reflection, we have special values about who we are as people, you know, and where we want to go as a democracy. Um, in the US, it's different, and that's okay if it's different. I don't judge, but in France, you know, we consider that people are mostly not consumers, but mostly citizens. They're also consumers, but mostly citizen first. And then if they can consume, that's okay. In the US, data, and you know, and we all know about data brokers and all of that. In the US, everything is for sale and buying and stuff. In France, you know, that's an issue. And I think the products, information technology products that we use should, if they're built here in Europe, are you know, carry European values. And also, you've probably heard about the GDPR, the
Yeah.
General Data Protection Rule. It's a European law, and it didn't happen in Europe randomly. It's because, you know, it's an illustration, an example of these values that are being put into the law. And so I think we also need in Europe to build products to serve the European citizens with products that have the European values with them. And privacy is one of these values. Privacy in Europe is a lot stronger than in US, and I think it's good. I mean, it's, and I don't judge, but you know, I'm happy to be living in Europe for this. And so the second reason, the second thing, you know, what I that I think interesting is we need to make sure we have products and that these products are built locally. And on top of that, it's good to have jobs basically here in Europe. They have tons of jobs in the Silicon Valley, and that's fine, and I love the place. But I want, you know, highly skilled jobs of the 21st century. I want these jobs also to be created where I live, so and where my people live. So that's my second thing, and I understand this argument may not be heard well uh, by people in other places, but I'm sure people in India, for example, could have a very similar way of thinking, but instead of wanting products made in Europe, would want products made in India with Indian values, and that's just fine by me. The question really behind all of that is: are you, as a group of people, as a country, or as a continent, are you in a state of sovereignty over your over IT, information technology, over digital stuff?
Okay. That was also very long, but it was very fascinating to listen to again.
Sorry,
No, you're fine.
it's complicated, so
It
it's hard to
is.
make it super. Well, yeah.
It is a very complicated topic, and it's not something that you can answer in like 30 seconds. So I totally understand it. I'm very grateful for your answer. But according to what we agreed in the beginning, we are over time. But I'm more than welcome to continue if you want to.
We started late, so that's fine.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, so
No, no, no. I'm
there are
just not
some
blaming you.
okay, there are some Reddit questions that you kind of already answered, in both of these questions that I asked you, and you went into great depths. So I'll ask some of the questions that I think you haven't touched. So some people were asking about, Qwant and how is it different from other privacy or, alternative search engines like DuckDuckGo and Startpage or SirX or however that's pronounced. And they are also asking if Qwant is going to be its own full search engine, or when is it going to stop relying on Bing for search results?
So, I really like DuckDuckGo. It's a good product, really. Um, like us, in the beginning, they do rely on Yahoo, which is actually Bing. If you, but yeah, it's a Bing content. Um, Going through a contract with Yahoo. Um, and we do have usage of Bing results, depending of the languages. Um, you can get more Bing results. You would get less Bing results in France, for example. Um, the truth is, when you start to build a product like a search engine, on day one, and for many months, you do not have a product, right?
Yeah.
You don't have anything to start. Building a search engine literally take years. So what we did is make an agreement with Microsoft, with Bing, to serve Bing results, while at the same time we are building our own index, our own technology, to to have our technology based in Europe with European values. And we are now on the same. We are still using Bing, but every day we use more and more the Qwant index and the Qwant technology. And as far as I can tell, it's not the case with DuckDuckGo, who's relying entirely on Yahoo index and other. I think they use Apple Maps for their Maps solution, and stuff like that. Um, and I don't think they're working really hard on their own technology, and I don't think they serve their own results. Um,
I think in their defense, they do have some of their web crawlers, but they might not be. They are pulling from Yahoo and Bing, but I also made some research into DuckDuckGo, and the results are not always copycats of neither Bing or Yahoo. They sometimes are a little bit different, and I think I've read this a while ago. They were indexing with their own web crawlers, but I'll double check that and see if that's true.
Well, I hope it's true. I think it's the right thing. And they're a U.S. company. They're serving their U.S. audience well, and we share the vision that having a a private search engine is a good thing, really.
Hmm.
So, like I said, I really like them. And then the more technology they do, the more independent they become, the better.
Yeah. Um, okay. Sorry, I kind of like jumped into your answer. So do you want to continue, or do you want me to ask other questions?
Can we say we have 15 minutes left? That's okay for you?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, good.
So I'll just go over some questions from users of Reddit. So okay, where do we stop? Uh, some people are asking if you're going to, crawl through content that is from Fediverse. And for people who don't know, Fediverse is basically um, applications that are mostly social media, but they can be connected with one another. So they are not their own ecosystem, just like Facebook or Twitter are. So you cannot use Facebook to communicate with Twitter users and vice versa. So Fediverse applications are like Mastodon, which is I think like a Twitter alternative, and it can communicate with other similar open source and free software um, social media applications and platforms that are part of the Fediverse. So the question was for you, Tristan, that are you gonna offer that for your users?
It's actually a good idea that we have. I think we will, we have tons of projects like that here at Qwant, but we're considering indexing the Fediverse. We will probably start with videos. I don't know if you've heard about PeerTube,
Yeah.
which is one of the apps of the Fediverse, which I really like because well, it's fighting the monopoly, and on the video, which kind of ironic that I'm saying that, but the YouTube has so much power that it's very concerning. So
True.
I don't want to announce anything, but I had a conversation this week with my colleagues in technology and development that we should consider indexing PeerTube,
Okay.
stuff like that.
That sounds awesome. That would be really cool. So you mentioned different values in Europe as opposed to in the United States, and one of the like probably the biggest value in the United States is free speech. And if people are concerned about big tech and centralization of the web, it's mostly coming from the free speech perspective, and social media censoring. So their news feeds and comments and groups, and even Google censoring search results. Um, so a while ago, Qwant supported or somehow made some remarks about the European Copyright Directive that was actually passed recently. And I think that Qwant supported Article 13 and 15 regarding remuneration of the press. And some people are from the Reddit were asking like, what's your take on this? And what's your take on free speech on Qwant and search engine? And how are you approaching moderation of content on Qwant, or maybe even censorship, if that could be called?
Well, yeah, it's a really complicated question because it's basically it's philosophy if you if uh, if you want. Uh, and you are right in pointing that values between Europe and the US are different, like I said earlier. And this is just a very good example of how things differ from the US to Europe. In the US, free speech is like absolute. There are really few exceptions to free speech. And in Europe, and for historical reason, namely the World War II and the Nazi period, and all that it created here in Europe. Uh, it is something that is recent enough that people are concerned and still concerned 70 years and 75 years later about what happened when with the Nazi regime. This is why in Europe, for example, you cannot have, we're a lot tougher with hate speech and protection of, people based on their religion or skin color, because we've seen what it could do to democracy when you point fingers at a group of people just because they're slightly different in the way they behave, in the way they dress, in what they believe, or the skin color or their habits in general. And so we've seen how powerful hate speech is to manipulate masses. And the laws in Europe are very different and much more, someone could say, aggressive or, powerful to address this because we have experienced it firsthand, and we've seen millions of people die on our soil. And this has left, very strong bad memories, and has been, it has translated into specific bills, specific laws to prevent this from happening again. In the US, laws, on the other hand, because there is no such history in the US, laws is a lot more permissive. And so it's hard to compare the two, right? For example, in France, you are not allowed to sell Nazi items at all. You cannot.
Okay, so
Yeah,
but
for example, and maybe that's a good thing.
yeah,
I don't know.
but
Or maybe from where I am, it's a good thing.
I don't think anybody would disagree that hate speech can eventually lead to some kind of violent rhetoric. But that's why people
No,
could argue.
it's not rhetoric, it's actually dead people, you know?
Yeah,
It's people dying.
I mean it can
It's rhetoric in the beginning.
it can lead to that, and rhetoric is in the beginning. But that's why you have the constitution, so that even if fringe people who are dangerous to others and dangerous to democracy and freedom cannot actually do anything, even if they are in power. So in the United States, they wouldn't be able to change the constitution, or override the court orders or do something like that. I mean, there are cases where this happens, and the United States also has its problems dealing with this, and corruption is a problem everywhere. But when people are using these services, they're worried about unilateral enforcement of terms of service rules, and especially if they're acting as sort of a proxy for power. And this can be concerning for especially users in the United States who would like to use Qwant, but um, do you think they're right to be concerned that Qwant might be censoring their search results because the French government does not allow hate speech, or that Qwant itself is actually even more proactive in censoring speech that could be considered hate speech?
Well, we being a European company, we have to obey the European rules, and we do. So if Europe or France says this content is illegal, it is our duty as a French company to not display it because it's forbidden.
Okay.
So we do our best to comply with the rules. And so, yes, maybe there is there is content that we do not show when you search for it. That's the truth because that's the law, and we follow the rules and obey the law. On the other hand, there are things that the government could ask, which is which person searched for this and that. Can you give us the timestamp, which is the time and date and IP address of this person, so we can go after him or her? Well, if this happens, every search engine operating has to follow the rules. And if the government asks, you have to do it. We have, and you have the if you have the information, and the government asks for the information, you have to give the information, provided that the request from the government is legit and legitimate. At Qwant, we've decided to go in a very different position direction. What we do is when you ask for something, you do a search request, search query on Qwant.com. We do not log your IP address. We immediately forget your IP address. Actually, even during we use, of course, hundreds of servers to deliver our search results. From the get-go, when your IP address, we need it to return you with the data that you request, the result page, search engine result pages. This data we give is not transmitted through the servers. We're using a special token and as soon as we've sent back the information, we forget about your IP address. It is not logged. It is not listed anywhere in the infrastructure because we want to avoid that. If the authorities, if the police shows up on our door and asks for stuff like who searched this and that terms on that day, we want to be able to tell them we're sorry, we don't have the information, and you can check whether we have it or not because we don't. So this is our way of protecting privacy while respecting the law because we have to. Otherwise, all of us would be in jail at Qwant, and we don't want that. Do you see what I mean? It's the
Mm-hmm.
law is the law, and so we have to follow the law. And yet, where there is no law, when we manage not to gather information, so we can't deliver it to governments.
Okay, so somebody from Reddit actually picked up on this, and they quote your privacy policy that states that you are not storing or collecting any history of people's searches. And then in the same paragraph, you say that the searches are anonymized because you dissociate the IP address from them. And you kind of explained how you dissociate the IP address because you immediately forget it, but you still collect the searches. Is that right?
Yes, we do. We do because we have to, not for any legal reason or anything. It's just because we have a service which is auto suggest,
Mm-hmm.
which is we need to build the history not of one person but of all users
Mm-hmm.
to so that if a search comes often, we know it comes often and we can suggest it to the user.
And is there any other form of anonymization of this data, or what else are you collecting? Are you collecting just the query, or are you also collecting, browser fingerprint and device fingerprint?
No. We don't. With advertising, we need to make sure that people who click on ads are actual users, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because advertisers expect that. So there is that one thing where we need to collect the user agent, the user agent string, which is which browser and which user agent you use. And because we don't want it to be used by anyone else, we immediately hash it and salt it. And so I'm sorry for using technical words, but you could say we encrypt it in a way, so that's the data. We can see if someone comes often, but we don't know who that person is. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
So for those who don't understand, um, hashing is a math and code formula that goes only one way. You can't go back. You can hash something, but you cannot take the hash and go back to the original data.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure you know, but maybe not everyone knows.
Yeah. It's good that you explained it very reasonably for people who are not familiar with the technical term. Do we still have time for some more questions?
Maybe one.
Okay, so this one is quite important because some Reddit user asked about Christchurch call. Apparently Qwant signed up for that, and they are concerned with the free speech implications of this call. So what's the stance of Qwant on this?
Yes, we did sign it with other companies, and then we think it's good. I mean, we've been extremely concerned, and we want to find terrorism and extremist violence. Is it perfect? I don't think it is, but I think it's a step in the right direction. We need to be careful, for example, because one thing that I've seen is that the notion of terrorism can be used sometimes by some governments to basically, it's used to designate political dissidents or opposition.
True.
That's one of the cases where we need to be extremely careful, and we've seen that in history. But I mean, other than that, most people can recognize terrorism when they see terrorism. Right.
But could you like specify, any particular examples of how this Christchurch call is going to affect Qwant?
Well, I can't elaborate on that. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I know enough of the specific details on that. I wish I could, but I don't.
Okay, that's fine. Because the user just wanted to know if it's going to lead to some sort of censorship, or if it's going to lead to you being forced to change some search results, or even the entire algorithm because of the call. But that's fine. So that was the last question.
Okay.
There are still some more questions on Reddit, but some of them are about Mozilla and stuff like that. And I think you kind of like answered most of the things that people asked about. So I'm very happy with that. And if there's anything else that you would like to say, you're very welcome to, of course.
Well, I'm not paid by Mozilla, but I would like to say try Firefox. Seriously, it's got a lot better recently. It's independent. It's open source, so people can audit it. It's a non-profit. I think the web needs Mozilla, and the Mozilla needs users, and I think it's better for people who are concerned about privacy to use Firefox rather than a web browser like Chrome. So go ahead and try it. And same for Qwant. Go ahead and try Qwant.com. Let us know how you like it, and you'll see it's actually pretty good.
Okay. That's an excellent note to end it on. So thank you very much, Tristan, and I wish you all the best. Thank you for the extended time that you gave me I apologize for the technical problems at the beginning, and
No worries.
um, on behalf of the whole community, it's very appreciated that you actually came forward and spoke, because people really want to hear about um, all these issues from real experts, and I really appreciate that you came forward. So thank you.
It's a pleasure, and really I like what you do, uh, educating people and sharing what we know, um, about digital products and all of that is a tough work, and I want to thank you very much for doing it, and all your audience and your community for taking time learning about it and sharing. I hope they share all they learn with their friends and family, because we really need to become better as a group, understanding how digital products and applications and software is having such an impact uh, on us.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. I'm doing my best. It's not the best that
You're
it
doing
can
really
be.
well.
Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay. So that's it from me. Thank you, and I would say have a good night in Paris, and say hello
Yes,
say
it's
hello
late.
to
Yes.
your colleagues in Qwant.
Yes, we'll do. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day or night, whatever, wherever you are.
Thank you. Bye bye.
You're welcome. Bye bye.